Hey,
Oh, hi there.
welcome to the Beer Garden. This is your landscape industry podcast that lasts as long as it takes to enjoy your favorite beverage. I'm never certain how to act coming out of that intro. Like I feel like I should just be screaming the second that we come out of it. But
I love it.
anyways, how you doing, Brandon?
Good, good. It's we just recovered from a very difficult snow week at the landscape company. I got the pleasure of operating one of the wheel loaders for a day. Got to push some snow. Nice Metal Plus plow on it. Just a beaut.
Wow, you were out on the tools.
I know I was, yeah.
Wow. How long has it been? Were you rusty?
It's been some time. My soft office hands, I can barely type. They have so many blisters.
Yeah.
No, it was nice. Listened to an audiobook called Decisive while I was out there, which was pretty good. And yeah, it was fun. And now the weather's nice and warm. We have a Chinook in Calgary, lots of sun. And yeah, been waiting to do the podcast all day and looking forward to it.
Awesome. Tell me what you're drinking.
I've had this one on here before, Okami Kasu by Old Beautiful, local Calgary brewery. One of my favorite beers, period, but especially made here in Calgary. This is the one, if you remember, their brewery burnt down.
I do remember you telling us about that.
And luckily they still had a supply somehow. So yeah.
Nice.
That's Okami Kasu by Old Beautiful. Very good. Japanese ale, they call it.
Cool.
What do you got?
Today, I'll be drinking from Loveland Ale Works right here in Loveland, Colorado, the Double Fudge Brownie Porter. I've not had this before.
Okay.
So on that note, I want to crack them and cheers.
Yeah, let's do this. I feel like we're supposed to just chug after that or something. Just take a little sip, and that's how I like to consume my beverages, very slowly.
Taste like an actual brownie. It's really good.
All right.
Want to tell us what we're talking about?
Yeah. Today we are talking about growing your business, scaling your business, doing it in a smart way, growing it depending, where everybody's at, up to $1 million, $3 million, and beyond. If you're way too far beyond those numbers, we may not have a lot to tell you. We've experienced some of those numbers. So yeah, we're going to talk about that today, talk about some of the reasons and maybe fears that owners have or management teams have to grow past these things, some of the things that hold them back, the root of the problem, and kind of what it looks like too. I think I always like to put things in that perspective. Like, if we're doing X revenue a year today, what would it actually look like if we grew 3 times the size, or we grew to whatever the next level is? So what are some bullet points of what that looks like? We'll go over that today. And just some of the core pieces that you kind of need to have in place to get there. So yeah,
cool.
I love it. This is a really good topic, I think.
Yeah, this is one that I feel like we've sat around drinking beers, chatting about quite a bit. I think of like a lot of the retreats that we've gone on with lots of other business owners, and the beauty of that is you're often sitting around a table with people of different sizes, and you get an opportunity to really pick their brains. Not people of different sizes, but people who have businesses.
They're different sizes,
yeah,
and their businesses are different sizes.
Totally. So yeah, let's dive right into it. I think it's interesting to talk about, like, call it the root of the problem, as you said. So like, what are some of the kind of roadblocks that people that you've seen that like people have around this idea of like scaling and growth, and whether it's blind spots or like actual just kind of roadblocks? What does that look like?
So I think the root of the problem pretty much always has to do with the owner, or the management team, the leadership team. First of all, the the person that the person you need to be to run a business that is, say even $1 million, or especially $2 or $3 million, the person you need to be is a different person than you are when you started. If you started from zero, right? If you can get it to, you can probably get it to 700, 800 grand a year. By the way, we're going to just be basically talking about maintenance as usual. We're talking about selling time for the most part, not materials. Those guys have it easy, easy. But you really have to be a different person. You have to get good at recruiting. You have to get good at developing staff at the higher levels. You have to trust other people with your business and to make decisions that could be very expensive. Um, you need to develop yourself. You have to advance as a person to get to those levels, and that's some of the best part of it. So I think that's the biggest thing that holds people back and holds businesses back is the owner is scared. Like, some of the hardest times running my business was, between, I'll say, 8 or 900 grand a year and like 1.3 or 1.4 million or something like that. Like, that was the hardest slog to get through. And I remember thinking back then, um, like, how do people run a business that's double this size or triple this size or way more? There's huge businesses out there, right? And they run them very successfully, as it appears. And it's just like, how do they do that, right? And so it doesn't mean it's twice as hard to run a business twice the size. I think that's the thing, and everything changes as you get bigger and you can afford more staff and all of those things. So, yeah, to me, that's the root of it. Um,
It's an important point.
so
Like, I think there's plenty of guys who are perfectly content, like, running their business at 300 grand, 500 grand. It's like them and maybe a handful of other guys out on the tools, and like that's what they want out of it. And that's totally okay. But I think it's safe to say like the majority of business owners in our space like want to grow. Like they're driven, they have this vision for where they want to go. They want to be one of those, at that next tier. They want to get to that point. But you're right, there's often that kind of like block there where it's just like it's fear based is what I've seen most
yeah,
of the time.
it's just a lot of the times, and you always have them. They're always there, but they're limiting beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you have them whether you think you do or not, and you'll catch yourself if you're paying attention. But you'll tell yourself things like, bigger companies have a lot lower margins, so I'm going to stay small. Or,
Yep.
you'll tell you kind of all this bullshit, like, there's not enough of X client in my market, or like, there's not enough good people, or like, these damn millennials, or these things are not possible because of X. And when you think of those kinds of things, or you hear people on your team saying those kind of things, I would really just check them if they're true. Like, really think about it, because they're holding you back. And if you're not going to grow to these higher levels, I think it should just be intentional, and you should know it, right?
Mhm.
And just say, okay, yeah, we're happy to stay with me on the tools and these two other people, or these two crews, whatever it may be, and we're just going to optimize that and stay here for the foreseeable future. Nothing wrong
Right.
with any of that, but
Yeah. One of the things that I remember finding really interesting as I started to talk to different people who ran businesses of different sizes was that there almost becomes these kind of defined like targets, especially in our space, like within landscape maintenance. But what's interesting actually was even talking to other trades businesses, the targets seem to be somewhat similar. And what I mean by that is by targets is like there's these tiers that are kind of optimal for like your business size. And I definitely want to dive into what those different tiers look like. But the tiers that I've always seen is it's like that 500 to a million, that range, like that, 500's like a good range, millions like a good tier to be at. And then it's like
what do
after
you
that,
mean
it's
by
like
good? Like good in what way?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is like, so let's take like a million to 3 million, right? Like if I'm $1 million business right now and I'm thinking about growing, for me, knowing what I know now and seeing other businesses operate, like I wouldn't necessarily, I would want to get to 3 million as quickly as possible. And that's speaking from experience, not like sitting at 2 million or 1.5 or 2.5. And there's a reason for that. It's like oftentimes within those kind of tiers, it's almost like dead zones, right? Like in between those target points where it requires just as much overhead to run a business at 2 million as it does at 3 million or very close,
Like
right?
dead
So
zones for profit, you mean?
yeah, dead zones for profit, and oftentimes, like, because there's zones for profit, you find yourself having to kind of cut corners to like eke out that extra profit to kind of get by when you're in the middle. And there's ways to do that, hybrid roles rather than like hiring just like a maybe a full-time production manager, maybe it's a production manager slash like on the tools or something. There's those sorts of things,
Yeah.
but oftentimes I just find that those spaces, those dead zones between those kind of optimal points are a bit uncomfortable and tend to have a bit less profit unless you really get creative. So um, I see it as like that 500,000, we'll talk about what that looks like in a minute, million, 3 million, and then 5 million, just
Sure.
to go kind of like iteratively there.
Yeah, I can add a bit of color to that. So it's kind of what your overhead will support. Like that's how we always, well, eventually how we thought of it once we realized this was happening to us after many years. But basically today, if you look at your shop, uh, let's say that you're running it out of your garage. It's you and 3 people show up every morning. And this year you're doing 700 grand this year. How much more could you grow while staying in your shop, in your garage, right? Like,
Mhm.
could you have 3 people that show up in the morning now that park their vehicles, against bylaw on the street and make a bunch of noise, and your neighbors are okay with it because you shovel their snow once in a while or whatever. But could you do it with 6 people? Could you do it with 9? Could you do it with 12? Right? Like how much could you grow and store the equipment and not get kicked out and um, park the trucks and all of those things out of your garage, right? Maybe it's only to 800 grand.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? That means that you, with the same amount of overhead, you're able to produce 800 grand as you were 700 grand.
Yeah.
You didn't have to move shops yet. So then you do have to move shops, right? As soon as you break 800, now you're at 850 or whatever. Now I'm at 850 and I have to go and lease my first shop, and it costs me 3 grand a month. And, I've taken on this new expense. Well, how much can you run out of that shop? Right? Sir, I hope you didn't go and buy something you can grow to like $5 million in, because,
Yeah.
that's, or you didn't rent something because it's going to hit you pretty hard. But you can probably go from maybe 850 where you are today until maybe you're at 1.5 million, and then there's no more space in the yard to park your trucks. So of course you're going to be more profitable at the 1.5 million than you were at 850 because the rent cost stays the same. And so it's all about capacities, right? You've got the capacity of your shop, you've got the capacity of yourself and managers. Like, you can manage those people, all your people that are showing up every day, up to the point where you have 3 crews, 4 crews, whatever. Eventually you need to hire, say, an operations manager. Now I've got an operations manager. How many people can she handle, right? She's overhead, right? She costs you 70 grand a year, 80 grand a year, whatever it may be. Now that expense is there and you're still growing revenue until that capacity breaks, right?
Right.
So it's really just all of these fluctuating capacities all over the place that you're trying to anticipate before you get there. And that, I think, is what you're saying, where it's like, okay, I got to 1 million, I rented a shop, I hired a manager because I have to grow, but I'm not going to make any money. Even though last year I made 800, this year I'm
Yeah.
doing 1 million and I make less money. Well, that's
Right.
because you just took on overhead and you need to like sprint to get to the top of that capacity, or higher in it anyway.
Exactly. And those are those tiers I'm kind of talking about. It's like sprint to that next tier. And then oftentimes I've found it, you know, wise to maybe sit at that next point for a little bit, right? So like you've maxed out your capacity, like sit, be very profitable, and then
Yes.
focus on like building a plan to sprint to that next one. Um but don't feel like you have to just like hit it and then sprint to the next one right away.
Yeah, the key is to always do those things with an intention, right? It's
Yeah.
like it feels pretty bad when you cross 1 million. That's a big milestone for people, right? You pass your first $1 million in revenue, huge celebration. Feels really bad when you realize, oh man, I made less than I did the year before, and I did 800 grand.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel as bad if you knew that was going to happen, because you're dialed with your numbers, right? So you're like,
Right.
okay, next year's going to suck. We'll do 1 million. We'll have a cheap celebration, and then we're going to sprint. And the next year we'll be at 1.25, and we'll be in way better shape. So it
Yep.
just feels a lot better if you're, you know, dialed on it and you have your
Totally.
numbers figured out.
Let's dig deeper into that. So let's talk a little bit about like what it looks like at those different tiers. Let's just call it 500 to a million, 1 to 3 million, 3 to 5 million. And we can talk about like what the business looks like in those different tiers, what you look like, and just kind of dive into that. So like for you, thinking back, way back now, in that like 500 to $1 million range, what
We
did that
talk
look
like
like?
we're 60 or something.
I know.
Way back when we were 20 years old. Um, we were just commenting on how our hair is thinning a bit.
Yeah.
Jason and
Yeah.
I may go to Turkey. Is that where they
Yep.
do that? Yeah.
That's the one.
If you see us with hair all of a sudden, it's because we got
if
the
all
hair
this
plugs.
if all of a sudden there's like 6 months of us recording this with without our videos on, it's just all audio. It's because we're
Yeah.
waiting for him to come in.
Okay, so yeah, what it looked like 500 to 1 million. I looked 8 or 9 years younger, and I ran it from my garage. So we started from zero, and ran it from my garage. We had a few employees. I was still directing traffic every single morning, uh, going out, seeing what's going on. We had um, our longest time employee Parker started with me during that period, still with the company today, and yeah, ran it from my garage. So we had, I think, a couple old pickups, and I had basically no systems or processes. I was starting to work on them certainly by the time I was leaving the 500K kind of mark, but I would have been like interviewing, like just to give some more perspective, like what it actually looks like. I was not looking very, I wasn't very forward looking on recruiting. So it was
Mhm.
just like, oh, we won a couple new contracts this spring. I need staff to start in like next week. And so I would be interviewing them, at McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, wherever. And I was doing all of the estimating, sales. I was doing work, delivering material, fixing equipment, um, you know, that kind of thing, with help from our guys, but really
Yeah.
involved in everything. We had a part-time 10-hour a week uh, office manager by the
At
time
what?
we were at. That was about, I'll guess, like 650, 750
Mhm.
in revenue. And that was a good friend um, of Michelle's, that a childhood friend that worked part-time for us, stay-at-home mom. uh, that's, by the way, like a great pool of people that are really good for the type of role that can be flexible like that. For us, office manager, it was like, hey, we need to send our invoices, we need to, do our bookkeeping, these types of things. But it's not like we don't need it done 9 to 5, just it's about 10 hours a week, if you're doing it at 2 a.m. because your kids kept you up, that's okay. We just need it done by these kind of days. So yeah, she was very well educated, lots of good experience, and then decided to be a stay-at-home mom. So it was like awesome talent pool to draw from.
Yeah. I'm curious what your day to day looked like. Like, what were you doing? Were you out on the tools? Were you like with the guys in the field? What'd that look like?
I was on the tools a lot more around the 500 grand mark. Like I'm thinking back, 500 to a million, those did look quite a bit different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We'll call this all under a million because we'll talk
yeah,
about a million next.
yeah, definitely still on the tools. You know, a day or two a week,
Yep.
checking sites. Yeah, doing a lot of the legwork. I was already in a peer group, so I was paying myself next to nothing. Like
I was just going
maybe,
to ask that. Yeah.
yeah, maybe whatever whatever I could afford. Basically, it probably changed year to year. So we're
Were you
talking
on a
zero
consistent,
to no.
yeah. So it wasn't a consistent salary. You were basically pulling owner's draws when you could afford, when the business could afford to pay you, you could pay yourself basically.
Yeah, yeah, regularly through that range, our crew leaders would be making more than me. Like if they
Yep.
made 40 or 50 grand a year, that was 10, 20 grand a year or
Yeah.
40 grand a year more than me that year. And, we were growing a couple hundred grand, I would say, through that every single year. So I had to buy more equipment and
Yep.
um, yeah, it was tough, but I had a good idea of what I wanted to do, and I was in the peer group thing really helped. So ultimately, that's where I ended up meeting you later. But there's people that I met 8 years ago in that, 8 or 9 years ago in that peer group, when we were all fighting to get to $1 million, and that feeling is so good because you get it's very lonely at that in those
Yeah.
revenue numbers. Everybody by that time, even if you started when you were 20, like you look around and people are um, getting traction in their careers and moving up the ladder and doing that kind of thing. So I think that if you're at that range and you're in your 20s, it's such a difficult time to just get through the day to day because you're like, I'm not paying myself at all, and these guys get 2-3 weeks vacation time and all these benefits, and you're just cutting grass and
Yeah.
hoping for the best. So peer
Yeah.
group really helps because you can see other people a little bit further ahead of you and speak the same language with them.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. How about you? What was it like for you?
Very similar. Yeah, that 500,000 range is right about when I bought the business. And I had been an employee at the company up to that point, but yeah, it was so that I don't know the tier below that, like from an owner's perspective, but I can tell you that like one of the things that I remember being frustrating is knowing people that were running businesses that did 250 grand a year who were making more money and had more time than I did at 500 grand. And it's kind of what we are talking about, right? Like I
Yeah.
had a bunch of employees, I had some overhead now. They had like themselves a truck and maybe one other dude. And so they were paying themselves a lot better than I was. Um, so yeah, I was very frequently pulled back into the field. I wasn't in the field full time, but I was very frequently pulled back into the field. At the 500,000 range, I had no support staff. It was all infield staff and myself. Similar to you, the first support staff that I added was around, call it 750 grand, and it was an office manager. We went full time right out of the gates. Um, we were actually weirdly at the same shop that we are at currently, at that
That's
size.
very rare.
It is very rare. But you've seen our shop, like we should be in a much bigger shop now at our size than we are. We've just got very efficient um, with
Yeah.
our organization. The yeah, so first support staff was office manager. I was living for a while there at 500 grand. I was literally living at my office. I was living on a couch in my office. I like was all in into the company. That's what I had to do. Um,
Girlfriend at that time?
yes. Yes, I was like in a state of transition, we'll call it that, ending one relationship and and moving into another relationship. But yeah, there was a brief period where I was in a relationship and living at an office
Okay, well,
with no time. Like I didn't spend any time with that person because I was working all the time.
sure,
Hence
sure.
the transition. Um, yeah, so yeah, I think very similar to you. It all sounds
Yeah.
very similar.
So 1 to 3 million,
Mhm.
everything changes, and um, you really have to evolve a bit and learn some new skills to even get there, or you'll be stuck. Either fighting or accepting that you're gonna stay under 1 million in revenue. Um, so 1 to 3, that was our team started to kind of take shape. We moved to our first yard. So we just rented a gravel yard that was shared with, like, I don't know, 6 other businesses. It was just all sectioned off with chain link fence. It had um, one kind of shed building that wasn't insulated or anything, and an outhouse that was shared with all the other businesses. That was like a few-minute walk in the common area on the road. And so we got a C-can, like a converted C-can we rented, and plugged that into power, and that was what we had, a 20-foot C-can. So we had, uh, I don't know, we had a few crews, however many crews that is, I can't even remember, running out of there, and everybody was out of the one spot. I was definitely out of the field, but I was highly at risk of being in the field at any moment. There was definitely, like, times I get pulled in. And the idea here isn't that working in the field is bad. The idea here is that you probably have better things to do if you're trying to grow your business.
Right.
So don't hear it the wrong way. Like, it's, I don't mind working outside. It's just I should probably be growing the business and working on the business, not running a shovel.
Yeah.
And that would be best probably for all the employees too, if they've worked with me before. So yeah, that's kind of how it looked. I think we had definitely had our first operations manager.
Yeah. So you
Um,
started to add production staff. You had an operations manager
yeah,
now and an office manager.
we outgrew our office manager that was part time. Like, she was a stay at home mom, had another baby, and couldn't work the hours anymore, which we were very sad about. So we got another office manager. Churned through a couple of those in that time, and operations managers too. It's hard to build the right team that we finally landed on, but yeah, that was the slog.
Yep. One thing that was big for me in that range, like starting around 1 million, similar to you, prior to 1 million, I joined a peer group. I started to systemize a little bit, but I would say like that $1 million mark and on from there was like where we really dove into building systems into our business. That was
You
where it
have to have
became,
software, basically. Like,
yeah,
I don't know how you could do it without. Yeah,
yeah, you get a CRM, but also just like building SOPs, building like real systems into the business. It was just like now it became clear that like for it to scale, we needed to have consistent processes that everyone could follow. And that's when we really started to focus on building those systems.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more at that level? Like, just trying to paint a picture for people that are, approaching that, what it may look like for them.
Yeah.
So, like, skill sets, let's just quickly go through skill sets. Like, you
Oh yeah.
you have to be you have to kind of, like, let go of some things. You have
Yeah.
to start getting comfy with letting go. You don't Usually the last thing is estimating in sales. So
Yeah.
you can and maybe should, but that's usually the last thing that I see us people let go. You have to get good at development. So you should be learning all you can about leadership, reading books, joining groups, whatever you need to do so that you can lead others. Like you can't coach people above the level that you're at, right? So when you hire these individuals, you need to get really good at people development, and you should be starting to develop, your workers, your laborers to be crew leaders, and your crew leaders to prepare them someday to be whatever the next level is going to be, supervisors, and then maybe ops managers one day. So getting really good at that is key. And also I would say starting to really get clear on what you do and why you do it, and being able to cast a vision for that team. So it's really expensive when you're small to turn over key staff because you only have one or two,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's bad at any company size, but if you lose a crew leader and you only have four, that sucks. You just lost experience in your company. They know your sites, they know your customers. It's worse than when you have 20, right? And even worse at higher levels. So casting a vision of like, what are we helping you build? Like, why are we in this company with you? You pay about the same as everybody else. Like understanding why people would want to work for you, and starting to make yourself really attractive in your industry is important there. You're going to run out of
Building
friends and connections to hire.
this is yeah, what I hear is like this is where you have to start being really intentional about building a company culture, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
it's like when you're smaller, the culture just kind of comes organically, right? Like the culture is whatever you and the four dudes working with you are, like
Yeah.
what
You
you're
see
about.
everyone every day, all
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, you really have to start to think about like, all right, how do we either capture that and continue to create that? Like, how do we hire based off of that? Or like, is there something aspirational? Like, do we want to be better? Are we looking to evolve into kind of this next level? What does that look like? So yeah, building a culture, that's a big one. You're starting to like really think more about your hiring. I would add that like you're starting, although I just certainly hadn't mastered it at $1 million, but not to say I've mastered it now even, but like you're starting to get a lot better about like knowing your numbers and like focusing on like you're probably building budgets regularly where under $1 million you could maybe get away with like shooting from the hip and just kind of
Yeah.
like hitting it. But yeah, you're starting to be a bit more intentional kind of across the board.
Yeah. And you'll have to give other people spending power, right?
Yeah.
At some point here. So other people, crews, managers, etc., like you do have to start letting go of things as you grow. So if you don't have any plan for how money should be spent, um, it doesn't need to be, super detailed, but you can lose track really quickly. And yeah, it's often, in my experience, it's the small things that add up that kill you. We don't have to get into that too much here, but
Yeah.
it's not like your manager went out and bought a new zero turn or something. That's probably not happening. It's more just like, who bought all these damn work gloves? Like, how did we buy 80 pairs of safety glasses when we only have like 12 employees? Like, where did they all go? So
Right.
it's those things that add up to just thousands and thousands and kill you. So getting budgets and finances, and you're preparing for the next level, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go into the next level and none of your people know where you're going and they're not working with you on it, it's going to be much worse than if you had laid the groundwork for that.
Yeah. So at that next level, we'll call it 3 million and beyond. Some of the things that I've experienced as we got to that point was you mentioned like in the $1 million range and slightly above, you're really starting to hone your leadership skills and become a better leader. At the $3 million range and beyond, I think like one of the key things is you're learning how to develop leaders within your organization and they're leading and they're empowered to do so, which is even like another level of letting go and delegation. Not just I don't even like the term letting go because it's it's very intentional, right? It's like everyone at this point starts to understand their role in the business and their deliverables. You have a leadership team probably at this point. Like that's when we
Whether you
mentioned
know
like
it or not. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, we mentioned the office manager, then adding a production manager. Like you start to really shape like this team of people who are helping you run the business because it's no longer possible by yourself. Um, and it's really, you're really starting to build the groundwork for what's to come,
Mm-hmm.
and for future growth. You're probably at this point have enough layers to where you shouldn't be getting pulled back into the field. um, you you have a very clear picture of what the coming years look like, and you've thought through that, and everyone understands what the coming years look like. What else? What would you add at that point?
I would say like you should have you should have probably found what you're really good at, and hopefully, like if you've listened to enough of these episodes, you hear me talk the same way all the time, but just finding like one thing that you're really good at. So a customer type, it could be. I think that's something
Mhm.
people don't think about enough, is what customer type you serve. Are you a residential company? Are you a commercial company? Do you serve condos? Do you only serve small condos, big condos? Do you only serve restaurants? Do you only serve drive-through restaurants? Like what do you do and what do you not do? That's even more important, probably. Do you do construction and maintenance and arbor work and irrigation, you know, and roof or whatever, or do you only do maintenance and enhancements?
Right.
So I think that is key. And the more things you choose, the more complicated it's going to be as you grow. Um, so yeah, the more complicated for your staff, the more complicated you have to have way more pieces of equipment if you do multiple things and different sizes of properties and stuff like that. So I think finding the niche is really important. And yeah, you know 3 million and beyond is a pretty big range, but you should at least really start to have a team that feels like partners, like your leadership team. um, they should really feel like they got this. They maybe not right at 3 million, but you're not going to get past, I don't know, definitely not past 5. 4 is going to be tough, and your life's just going to be really stressful. So
Yeah.
it starts to look like when you do it right, and the beauty is as you grow, you can afford more of these people and you can afford to pay more, so you can attract top talent in your market, right? From these big companies that have been hiring all these people for all these years. So you can attract these people to help you build what your vision is, and you can spend way more time working on your business instead of in your business every day. Um, yeah, it for me, I'm at the office once a week, Thursdays every week, if you want to find me. And we have set meetings. So we have one-on-one meetings. Our, my operations manager, uh, Erica, and I'll have a meeting every week, and we'll just add, topics through the week to that thing. So it kind of consolidates all the conversation at that one time. And obviously we'll talk over Slack or over whatever she'll call me if there's other things that we need to discuss otherwise. But it starts to look a lot more like that. Like you're starting, you should be able to afford, if you're charging enough and all your numbers are right, you should be able to afford to start designing a job that you love for yourself, right? So
Mhm.
maybe it's a bit less time at the office, maybe more time with your family. You lose a contract, it's not the end of the world because you have a bunch more. You get a 1-star Google review, it's like whatever. There's a lot more, like you can take a lot more hits before you're down.
Yeah.
You lose one staff member, well, I have 3 more that know what that person does, or they're on vacation, it's not a big deal. You're starting to build layers between you and the shovel, right? Like there's layers of staff, like literally there's an ops manager maybe, and a supervisor, and then a crew leader, and maybe laterally too, like there's an ops manager and office manager that can help out, and then there's multiple supervisors. So if any one of those people leave, they can kind of help each other out and maybe recruit another person or whatever. So it's just not nearly as stressful. And 3 million plus is where you can pay yourself better. Again, this is all you can do 3 million and have a terrible company. So don't let us make sure you got you got your numbers right. It's not all about top line, but it's if you're running a profitable business at 3 million, which is very doable, of course, then you can pay yourself really well. You can take some vacations. You can do all these things, and it's just much harder. You have a lot less room for error. Maybe that's how I could sum it up at the smaller sizes.
Yep. Yeah. Your business can roll forward without falling apart, at least for a period of time, right? Like which you're not living at the office anymore. You you can take that vacation and like that's a good pressure test too. Like some guys just like to be there all the time. They like to be involved, those sorts of things. But like
Sure.
you need to know that your team's got this, as you mentioned. So
Yep.
cool.
One more thing quickly is you get more purchasing power. Like, it's unfortunate that it just works this way, but this is life. It's expensive to be small, right? It's expensive. It's expensive when you can't afford to buy things in bulk, like at
Yep.
home or whatever. It's the same kind of thing. So when you're bigger and you go into the store to buy 10 backpack blowers at a time, or 15 mowers, you get fleet pricing and things like that. So yeah, there's these built-in advantages to getting to these sizes.
Yep. For sure. Cool. So when I think about no matter what size you're at, like thinking about scaling to the next size, there's some key components that kind of go into that like you really should just in my opinion, should be kind of your focal points as you're thinking of mapping out that like that call it that sprint to that next size, right?
Yeah.
No matter what size you are, there's a few things that you should be focusing on right out of the gates. The first thing that comes to mind for me is just that org structure. And we'll do the Tuesday after this releases, tune into our sidecar episode. We'll do a sidecar where we specifically just dive into like this process of using your org structure to plan. But that's a big one. And when I say org structure, what I mean at a high level is just the map of who's in the organization and what they do at a very high level. What are their primary deliverables? So who's involved in the company at this size? Who's involved at the company in the next size? And what does that look like over the next couple of years as you sprint toward that next mark?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, we would do that. Today's 2024, so we would want to know, like, what do you think 2028 is going to look like?
Yeah.
And it's going to change slightly by the time you get there. Yeah, we'll get into it a bunch in the sidecar, but it's about how to build one and how to think about it, and there's some really key learnings, I'll say, along the way that I've screwed up, and it's just yeah, it's a really key tool to plan it out, and it's fun too, because you start to think of, today I do 800 grand. Like, what would $3 million look like? You don't have to be thinking of years. You don't have to say, oh, in 2028 or whatever. Just start saying, well, if I was to do $3 million, I have 2 crews today that do 400 each a year. What does 3 million look like then? And then that's way too many crews. So then how many, one ops manager? Well, that's too many people to report to one ops manager. So then is there another layer? Is there another ops manager? Like there's all this, I don't know. That's the part I love about business is the strategy and like the puzzle of putting all that together.
Yeah.
So I look
I
forward to
remember
talking about more.
that's one of my favorite memories of when I flew to Calgary and you and I drove across the country to Whistler.
Across the country.
Well,
One
part of it.
we drove one province west.
Yeah. We took the scenic route.
No, it is
But
across the country.
you and I had
Across the
competing
Rockies.
we had competing concepts for our org structure. We were debating that kind of what you just described, like that middle layer between a production or operations manager and the crew leads.
I think we were yelling at some points.
We were,
You're very passionate about that.
and we drug everyone that we met along the way into the conversation. I remember we stayed with Jeff Babcock in is he Surrey, Langley, Chilliwack? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
And
funny because of the name. Yeah,
got heated there with the three of us, like getting into it, because Jeff had his own twist on what he thought the best org structure was. Then we get to Whistler, and we've got like 5 other entrepreneurs with us sitting around pulling their org structures out, and everyone's getting in on. That was a lot of fun, actually. Like,
yeah, and we're all fighting to. I can't remember what size we were, but all fighting, around the million and a half, something like that
yeah,
mark. And there's, like, you thought there was 2 options when you came into the conversation, and by the time you're done, there was 5 options.
yeah,
And it's so frustrating. But that's the types of conversations you're having when you have a good peer group like that, right? You're not just going for beers and talking about Big Buck Hunter or whatever, which I also like. But.
Awesome. What's the next one? So org structure. What else we got?
I think you need, as early as you can, get yourself to focus on it in your life, probably, but in business certainly, is getting a budget and cash flow plan and starting to understand the language of finance, which is basically the language of business, right? You can't just hand things to an accountant or your bookkeeper and they hand it back and they tell you how you did at the end of the year. You'll never run a successful business, probably above $1 million or $2 million with that kind of mindset. You need to learn how to budget. You need to learn what all these margins mean and all these things mean and all this lingo, and get a cash flow plan in place. And there's so much of that in your future if you plan to grow your business, and you should know it even as early as you can from day one,
Right.
ideally.
And those things work together, right? Like you built your org structure, as you alluded to, like you're already thinking about, like, if I want to go from 800,000 to call it 1.5 million, I need X amount of crews. Well, then when you start working into your budget, you're like, okay, well, I know the top line number now, the revenue, but now I just added X amount of crews. How much does that cost? What supporting staff do they need? What's that going to cost? And you start to they work together. And then you kind of work into the next thing, which is like, okay, well, how are we going to go get all that extra revenue? So, like, first is understanding your ideal customer. We've talked about that probably in nauseum with many of our previous episodes. But then, like, what's the marketing and sales plan specifically to get to them? So if I need X amount of dollars, like, how much do I need to sell each month to get there?
Yes.
How many leads does that mean that I need? How many proposals do I have to turn out to get to that? Knowing our average job size, like you start to really like work into
so you start telling yourself, hey, $3 million in revenue, or 2, or whatever number you choose, looks like this on the org chart. Okay, now how many contracts is that? Like, I love the what does that look like kind of question, and just start writing out some bullet points. Like, oh, okay, today I have like 30 contracts. I'm going to need, 125. Holy smokes, right? And
this is where it always starts to get real. I feel like that
that's
moment
where it gets real. That's what, that's exactly right. What does it actually look like? All of these things we're mentioning, depending where you're at, can start out very simply. So don't get scared away when someone says build an org chart, or that's probably the least scary one. Build a budget and cash flow plan. Like, it can look like a 6-year-old drew it. That's okay. Whatever, just start. Luckily, finance and, small business kind of finance stuff, that's something that you can probably very easily take a course on weekends or at nights or things like that, if you don't have an accountant in your life to help you, like I did. But the marketing and sales plan thing, certainly important. And then another thing that people that are really successful do well is people development. And I think a common failure is that you focus on systems and processes and softwares and SOPs, and some, not everybody, but some people are more like their brain just works that way better than working on like people systems and developing people and just trusting that you're built, and just focusing on building the right team, and um, pruning the garden a little bit when you need to, firing people and things like that, right? So people will often, I find, in the early stages of business, they're not used to having all these tough conversations, and terminating someone that's been with them since they were a little smaller, from 500 grand, and the person's still there at 1.5, and they're like, terrible for your business. People just aren't used to having those conversations, and you need to get used to that, and you can't skirt around them with softwares and all these systems and things. So getting really good at just building a team and developing people is how I guess I could have summed that up a little quicker.
Yeah. I would also not want to take away, though, the aspect of thinking about systems. Like, that is another one I would say
See,
that,
Jason thinks the other way.
yeah, I do. I do. This is like the age-old
No,
argument
I
is
think you're
people
well
versus
balanced
systems.
on it.
But I do think that that is a key thing if you're, no matter what size you're at, thinking through, I think it goes hand in hand, right? It's like, cool, I'm adding a production manager in this new plan. Well, what does this production manager need to know how to do? Everything up to this point has been in my head. So like, what, like, and it can be very basic, but it's just like, what is the bullet list I need to give this production manager of like how to schedule jobs or whatever it is? Like, somehow
Totally.
you got to start to get this stuff out of your head and be able to be
Totally.
handed
Yeah.
off to someone else.
Sorry if it came across like don't do systems. Like that's not what I meant at all. It's just um, systems will never fix bad people, and I think
Yes.
that's the point I was trying to make, is like make sure you get the right person and be relentless at that, and then make sure you build some scheduling systems and some good systems
Totally.
alongside that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think that's great. Like we said, we'll do a sidecar coming up here this next Tuesday on the org structure. If you want to hear a sidecar on any of those topics, though, drop it in our comments and let us know what you'd like to hear a sidecar on, where we dive deep and give you an actionable list to actually implement it. That being said, I think it's last call.
Oh yeah.
So let's do a little cheers here.
Cheers. Cheers to you, sir. You want to do a speed round?
Let's do it. Let's speed round.
This is a
You
new
want to
thing.
start or you want me to start?
I jumped to say that so that I could be asking
Okay.
questions first.
All right.
So this, not rehearsed, speed round. Best resource or content on this topic, Jason?
Resource, Breakthrough Academy. Coaching organization. We talked about it multiple times. That's going to be the thing that's going to help you scale.
Good one. Best advice or biggest win?
Ooh, best advice.
Around scaling, to 3 million and beyond.
Oh,
Best advice you've ever been given, maybe? Best advice you've been given, or
I want to flip flop my answers now. I want to say best resource, the E-Myth. It's going to cover like all these different topics and kind of help you like think through them. Best advice is don't be on an island, join a peer group, and that is Breakthrough Academy.
okay,
The one.
attaboy. Good one. Slow speed round this time. Biggest blunder, or how could you fuck this up the most, would you say? Excuse my French.
Not moving, like being afraid and just not taking action. Like that's, I think the biggest thing is just sitting in one place stagnant and blaming all the external factors for the reasons that you're not moving forward.
Yep. What you don't change, you choose. I heard
Yeah.
that the other day. I liked it.
I like that. All right. You ready?
Nope.
You've had some time to think about it now. Best resource or content on this topic?
I love the book Good to Great. Very good content, like book recommendation for this, I think, to exemplify what great companies look like.
Love that. Best advice or biggest win?
Biggest win was getting the team right, like getting the people right in the company.
Love that. Biggest blunder or the way that you could fuck this up?
The thing that set us back the most was certainly just related to people mistakes or taking too long to have tough conversations. The biggest way you can screw up growing your business is not knowing your numbers or spending too much money. Like, I think it's usually roofers, but you see these roofers with these huge shiny trucks. They have like 4 employees and they have the biggest truck you can imagine. That's like $200,000. Those guys are not making any money. So don't try to flaunt it too early before you know your numbers and you can afford it. I would say.
That's not only business advice with Brandon, that's life advice with Brandon. That's that was gold.
I'm gonna get a bunch of roofers come beat me up.
This is multiple episodes now where we've given them shit, so it's gonna be a theme.
Who would win in a fight? 100 landscapers or 100 roofers?
Well, I always compare it to high school.
They have tools of the trade as their weapons.
The
air guns and lawnmowers and weed whackers.
Yeah, that's true. We have chainsaws. I'm going with landscapers.
Yeah, we do have a lot better stuff.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Hit me with your ladder?
Yeah, exactly. Get out of here with that. All right, close it off. Give me a beer rating.
Let's do a beer rating. Yeah. Old Beautiful Okamikasu. Let me take one more sip.
What's the scale we're going on for this beer rating?
No set scale.
Okay.
I give this a damn, that's good beer. Yeah, I give it a good plus.
Okay, good. All right. All right. Loveland Ale Works Double Fudge Brownie Porter. I'm going to give this a 8.9.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm not going to say what that's out of, but an 8.9.
The tone of your voice matched the title of the beer, I tell you that.
Yeah. It's what I will say about this is I don't think I could drink another one of these right now. Like, you can only have so many brownies, but a very nice treat. Treat yourself.
Very good.
All right.
Cool.
I think we can get out of here.
Yeah, I think we can get out of here. Don't forget to join us on the sidecar if you want to learn more about the org structures, and we're going to go a little deeper on that. That's probably the most, I don't know, I think that one of the best tools to get good at. So yeah, that's it.
Cool.
If there's anything else too, I mean, we can do these sidecar episodes pretty quick. And, if you want to hear more about some of those things you heard in the episode, just throw it in the comments and we'll throw it in the queue.
For sure. Sounds good. Well, give us a like, comment, and a share. Everyone have a happy holidays, and cheers.
Cheers.